are now entering the Horror Sanctum.
Hello, and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum. I'm Jay, along with John, Kellen, and TJ, and happy 4th of July tomorrow. This week, we decided to take a break from our normal dungeons and graveyards and decided to head to the beautiful and peaceful beaches of Amity Island. But we did not come alone. We are joined today by musician, composer, artist, writer, and fellow horror fan, Steven Toby, from the Nashville-based rock band, The Nearly Deads. Steven, welcome to the show, and Surf's Up.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so excited.
I've known you for a while. I've helped you book a few shows with The Nearly Deads, including an upcoming show that we'll discuss a little bit later. But as we do with all our guests, we ask that they pick a few movies that they would like to talk about, and then we pick one of those said films. Time frame wise, Jaws worked out perfectly. So we will be talking about the classic Jaws from 1975, directed by Steven Spielberg. Maybe you've heard of it. Surely to God you've heard of it. Even Kellen's seen it, so you should have seen it too. So Jaws is the story of Marlin, who's a clownfish, who's overly cautious of his son, Nemo. Nemo has a little fin. He tries to get brave. He swims too close to the surface.
Jay.
Yeah. What?
That's the plot of Finding Nemo.
Oh shit! I must have downloaded the wrong movie.
Happens to the best of us. But yeah, no. Anyway, so what really happens is when the body of a young woman is found mangled on the shores of Amity Island, Police Chief Brody decides maybe we need to step out of the water till we know what's really happening. But with July 4th fast approaching, for a town hungry for those sweet, sweet tourist dollars, Mayor Vaughn decides, what's the worst that could happen? Well, literally everything after that is the worst that could happen. Anyway, to avoid further disaster, Chief Brody, with the help of marine biologist Hooper and life-hardened Captain Quint, they set out on a quest to capture the infamous Jaws. So, everybody should know this movie. Everybody should have seen this movie. If you haven't seen this movie, I don't know what you're doing with your life. It's a summertime classic. It's a horror classic. It's one of Steven Spielberg's, best movies from, early in his career. Possibly one of his best movies of all time. The movie is almost, I'm not even gonna say almost. This is a perfect film. The pacing, the action, the speed at which things happen. You would not realize that this is a 2-hour movie until you look at the running time and realize this is a 2-hour movie because everything happens and it's so well spaced out. There's not a lot of downtime in this movie. It keeps you from the opening 5 minutes till the very end, basically on the edge of your seat. And I feel like I'm a little bit of an expert in this movie because I did read the book. I don't know if anyone else has read
Nerd
the little
alert.
golden
We
book
need like
Jaws.
a siren for whenever you say I read the book. Just
the ending
It's
of
a
the little
drinking
golden
game.
book Jaws, it's a little different.
That looks like one of those golden like Disney books for the kids.
That's exactly what it is. It's a little golden book of Jaws.
Oh, yeah?
Wow. An official one. Wow.
Yeah. And it does not end the same. So for anybody wondering, no, the ending of this book is a lot different than the ending of the movie. But it's one of those films. Even, everybody knows John Williams is probably one of, if not the most prolific, cinematic composer in Hollywood history. But Jaws is one of those exceptional pieces because it's so simple. The music, there's not, it builds and everything, but just that, it's instantly recognizable, just like anything from any of the big franchises, Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, all of those movies that have these recognizable themes, as soon as you hear those two notes, you instantly know what it's referring to. The acting in this movie is fantastic. The characters that they have, the way they contrast each other, it's just such a great film. It's so hard to even go through this movie and try to find something that's wrong with it. I mean, you read the backstory and everything that went wrong in the making of this movie, and then you see the finished product and you realize what a genius Spielberg was as a director. It still is, minus a couple of missteps. But yeah, Jaws is, when I found out that we were going to be reviewing this one, I was so excited just to watch it again. That tells you how great of a movie it is, because I've seen this movie several times, and the thought of rewatching it, sometimes we pick a movie and it's like, I need to rewatch it just so I can refresh my memory on things. But this one was like, ooh, I get to rewatch Jaws. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to carry on since we have a guest. I'd love to hear what he has to say about it when we get to him. But yeah, Jaws, just a fantastic film. If you haven't watched it, go watch it twice.
Yeah, I haven't. When I rewatched it this week, I can't remember the last time I watched it start to finish. Whenever it's on TV, I watch it naturally because it's there and you just kind of want to watch it. But I don't know the last time I actually watched it start to finish. And it just, kind of like when we did The Shining, it just kind of reopened that love I had for the film. So let's go to TJ next. TJ, tell us a little bit about what you thought about the shark movie.
Yeah, so Jaws is probably honestly one of my first forays into horror, because it was a PG horror film that come on TV all the time. And I remember watching it with my dad when I was probably like 4 years old. I am not a swimmer. when they said, when they said, just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, I've never thought it was safe to go back in the water after watching this movie. and for the longest time as a young kid, I remember that score, John Williams score, that little 2-note da 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 da, getting even choppier with that staccato, very much mimicking kind of the Bernard Herrmann Psycho kind of thing of the shower scene of that. It's just on the kind of the lower end of the spectrum. And I think that was kind of, once they realized the shark wouldn't work, basically, and that it took what was budgeted to be a 2-month shoot to be an over 5-month shoot for only his second major motion picture that wasn't a made for TV movie. He thought, Steven Spielberg thought this movie was going to be the movie that killed his career. But man, the gods of cinema were smiling down, and it just, the scrappiness of a young crew, some younger actors, and mixed with some seasoned actors, Robert Shaw, Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss. This was his breakout role as Hooper. He almost didn't take this film. He almost took a film called Lucky Lady that nobody remembers now, but it was a Burt Reynolds movie. And he thought that was going to be the thing instead of this thing. And actually, that was the movie Steven Spielberg wanted to direct. He had an opportunity. He was already attached to that movie too. And the producer on this film, basically, who was his mentor, forced him to take this film and said, no, what you did basically with the movie Duel, which I think is still one of Steven Spielberg's best, simplest movies. It was his first made for TV film in 1970, I think. Great film. Basically, that film is Jaws with a big 18-wheeler truck. And so they already had kind of the format. However, that was not what this movie was intended to be. There's some great documentaries on YouTube, full-length feature documentaries about Jaws, the legacy of Jaws, the making of Jaws. I've seen a couple of those. I highly recommend checking those out, because so much good information. It's hard to believe, like people our age don't ever know of a life without Jaws. Jaws was the first original summer blockbuster 48 years ago now. 2 years before Star Wars kind of made it a regular thing. This was the film that made people flock to theaters in the summertime and made the summertime blockbuster a real thing. But man, did it have to overcome so much in the production to do this. Originally, they had scripted and had storyboarded out. The shark was going to be this main feature thing. You're going to see a lot more of the shark. But the mechanics and stuff just weren't there. They had to have a whole crew just to fix the shark all the time, and they had an island that they made on a barge because they actually did the dumbass thing of filming. This was like the first major motion picture to film actually on the Atlantic Ocean, not on a Hollywood set, not in a tank like you would do with green screens and stuff now. Like, I don't think anybody'd ever do this big of a production, actually having to wait. And they didn't have the technology to just take out the sailboats and stuff in the background and stuff. They had to literally wait until the whole horizon line made it look like they were out in the middle of nowhere. It's just wild. But because the shark kept breaking down, they actually had to make that nuanced thing that the John Williams score helped to create, that theme that it created for the shark, which I'll have a trivia note for. What was the shark's name? Because they had a name for him on set and they referred to him as a name. So that'll be later. But they had to also in the way that they shot in the filming, they created some rigs and stuff that had not been used before that they could kind of do like a Steadicam type situation, but could go in and out of the water. And so that was to basically do like what John Carpenter would do with the shapes viewpoint, having the shark viewpoint. So the camera and the score basically took the part of Jaws, the shark. And I just think it made it such a better film because the suspense, like when you're seeing from underneath the surface of the water, these people's feet just swimming, and you're getting right up there to their toes, that's the shark. He's just right there about to take a bite out of them. They don't know. And that's that awesome Hitchcockian suspense thing. It's like showing with the camera, the audience, things that the characters don't know, is like that Hitchcock recipe for suspense. So this is a film, and I hadn't actually watched this in a long time. I watched it a lot as a kid. I have the T-shirt. I'm representing, but I still think it's a top 5 Steven Spielberg film, probably, not to get into ratings and stuff, because it is the film that gave him a career and is the reason he can still make movies now. And it's just in the American zeitgeist of films. Like, if you're going to study film, you got to watch Jaws. And to Kellen's point, it's 2 hours, 4 minutes long. Most films, especially suspense, thriller, summer type films that go that long, feel long. This feels like a 90-minute film. And that's just a testament to the editing and the pacing and the suspense building and the payoff, obviously, and the final scenes. So that's enough for me. What do you think, Jay?
So I'm with you. Well, I think I'm with everybody, honestly. Like I said, I haven't seen it start to finish all the way through. I probably saw this movie so many times as a kid because it's on TV, and of course your parents are always watching it. You pick it up. It's just one of those things that you see. After rewatching it, it doesn't feel like a 2 hour plus movie at all. I don't think. The pacing is pretty solid. I can see how someone can come back and say it's a little slow. I'll give them that to a degree. But like you said, at the end, the payoff is so satisfying. I think Hooper is probably my favorite character besides Quint in the film. They're both perfect. They're perfectly cast. I couldn't even imagine. Can you imagine Richard Dreyfuss if he didn't take that role? Like, just imagine how he would be today. Like, you want to talk about some regret. Like, I couldn't even imagine. I did love, like you hit on it too, the Hitchcockian film style. Like I love that because I was always scared of the ocean. I was scared of lakes. Like almost rather get bit by a fish or a shark than a snake to a degree. There's just that fear of the unknown that you can't see that I don't like. Like even when we go on vacation now, I want to go somewhere around the Gulf just because the water's clearer. But you can also see more there as well. So you can see all the fish, all the crabs, everything else, which is not any less scary, I don't think. But I really do think it's one of those perfect films that you can rewatch it over and over again. You can watch it every 4th of July to help celebrate. And it doesn't, nothing's taken away. Like every time you watch it, I'm not finding a flaw. I'm not finding something I wish they had done differently. I'm not bored. Like it just has that great rewatchability, and it's something that's very rare, especially from a movie, from so long ago. Because even the movies we watch, like from the '60s, like sometimes they're really great, but they're slow. But you want to watch them again, like it kind of feels more like a chore. But when we're like, let's watch Jaws, it didn't feel like a chore at all. It's like, man, this just gives me an excuse to break out the vinyl and listen to the score, to break out my steelbook that I've never opened. Like it just gives you that excuse and you get excited about it. So when we picked that, I was excited about it. Definitely top 10 film for me, horror wise. And that's saying a lot. And of course, that's a little recency bias watching it again. Next week, I'll probably have another, top 10. But overall, fantastic. I'm really glad we chose this one, and it worked perfectly with the timing. Steven, our guest of honor, the one who picked Jaws, tell us why this is a movie you picked and what you thought about it.
Okay. Well, I mean, any excuse to talk about Jaws, I'll take. But yeah, when you asked me if I wanted to go on the podcast and to kind of pick a favorite, I know it's a horror movie podcast, and it's one of those things that all of us here would, no question, consider it a horror movie. But I feel like Jaws is always kind of that, like, if you just talk to somebody on the street, it's like, is it horror? Is it not? Do people consider the creature feature or the monster movie a quote unquote horror movie? So at first, I was thinking about other films that fit the genre, clearly. But I can't remember if I asked if you considered this a horror movie or not. But when you said yeah, when I pitched it to you, I was excited because Jaws is my favorite movie of all time. Like I have such a hard time picking, like, when everybody's like, what's your top 5 or your top 10? I love so many things, and I'm such a fan of, whether it's music, film, video games, whatever. I'm a fan of things. So it's really hard to narrow things down for me. But Jaws is just one of those, it's just the easy, yes, this is my favorite movie of all time. And over Star Wars, over anything else that, like, I have Star Wars tattoos. I'd pick Jaws over Star Wars. It's a film. It's hard to say anything else. Like, you all have done such a good job of talking up the film. But yeah, it's just like, anytime it's on, I can sit and watch it. I'm not bored. I do think it's a perfect film as far as, like, what everybody's mentioned is, the effects, the filming style, the narrative, the dialogue, the acting, the scares are all great. And it's kind of one of those things that, like, it captured me as a kid, because it was like, oh, it's a scary shark, and I'm seeing gore for the first time or whatever. But as I grown up to be adult and continue to watch it, you're like, no, that it's like, it's not just a grindhouse, summer blockbuster horror film. Like, the acting and everything, like, this is like top level stuff. Like the dialogue and listening to the conversations and how they react to each other. It's like, not that the script is like Shakespearean or anything, but it's just believable. Like, it's all very, the things that they're saying, there's like no wasted dialogue, there's no like cheesy, kind of forced sounding conversations. If you believe in this world and everything everybody has to say, everything that they're doing in this world all makes sense. And then, yeah, you have your characters who are very fleshed out, and the actors portrayed them so well. And yeah, you get scenes like when they're in the boat, when he's talking about the secret mission, and and they're comparing scars, and that those kind of moments that are just like sort of heartfelt between characters that you don't normally see in like a horror film. Usually it glosses over all that for like the spooks. But yeah, I think who said earlier that it was like their first horror film.
It was definitely one of my first, for sure.
Yeah, TJ, you said that. Yeah, for me as well. Like I grew up like not being able, like my parents were very they censored what I watched, and I remember being in like middle school or getting close to high school, and I really liked sharks, and I kind of like begged my dad, and he's like, you're not gonna want to go to the beach, but and finally he let me watch it. We rented it and ordered pizza and watched it, and I immediately like fell in love with it. But it's funny because everybody always talked about like, oh, I saw the movie, I never want to get in the ocean again. I remember, I think we watched it on like a Thursday, and that weekend we went to the beach, and I had no problem. Like, I got out in the ocean, I swam in the ocean, didn't think about it twice. It wasn't until like the next week that we were back home, and I would wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares, but crazy nightmares that make absolutely no sense, because there was like a little pond behind my house. I remember distinctly my nightmares were like the pond flooded, and somehow Jaws was in the pond and rode the flood crashing into my house and was going to kill me in my house. I had complete irrational fears about the movie, but no fears about getting in the ocean and getting attacked by an actual shark. A legitimate fear, but yeah, it's probably the movie I've seen the most out of any movie, and I had just watched it again a couple months ago, and yeah, I mean, there's not much more to say. I love Steven Spielberg films. I think he just has like sort of a sense of adventure and like charm in his style of filming. And then yeah, I'm really into music, and movie scores is what kind of got me to be a musician. And yeah, John Williams is top of the game up there. And yeah, I mean, he basically saved the film. If it wasn't for him, like you were mentioning earlier, all the issues that they had with the shark and it breaking down because it was in actual water, and they had to cut all those scenes. It's like, if he didn't have the score to back up the camera shots, those shots wouldn't be scary. You wouldn't be able to use them if he hadn't created a character within the music as well.
Yeah, it'd be like watching Halloween without the classic theme and the score of Carpenter.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It did a lot to like carry the film. But yeah, it's great.
You have a sci-fi original idea there with Pond Shark. We can make that happen.
We could.
Pond Shark.
I mean, it's been
That's
everywhere.
funny.
They've been everywhere else. Ghost Shark exists. So
there's Land Shark.
Yeah. I think we saw too the other night, our band does like a monthly stream, and we were talking about something, and somebody was like, oh, why don't we do like space sharks or something? And then I think somebody looked it up, and I think there is actually
there's one in Mars, I think.
Shark Side of the Moon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is one whenever we eventually get back to our bucket of movies, that is in there for us to watch.
Wow.
But they're more like mutated sharks, I think. They're like walk on their they have legs and arms and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like
that's
that old
crazy.
cartoon, the shark dudes.
Killer Shark, or what was that?
Oh,
Shark.
the
Street
Sharks.
Sharks.
Yeah,
Street
yeah.
Sharks. Yeah.
Sharks. Yeah,
Vin
yeah.
Diesel was in that commercial for Street Sharks back in the
Oh, really?
day. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
We were debating
Um,
though, because like you're talking about them being on Mars or something. We're like, oh, okay, would it just be sharks on another planet, or would it be like those I can't think of the name, but in Star Wars, the Clone Wars, there's like the whales that ride through
Yeah.
like hyperspace or whatever.
Oh,
And I was like,
Astro
well, what if,
Sharks. That's
yeah,
the
would it be like
movie,
sharks
Astro
that
Sharks.
swim in space? You know, like something like
Yes.
that.
I love it.
Yeah, it's great.
So
All
we
right,
got
John,
ideas here.
John, bat and cleanup, technically, at 5.
Yeah, so interesting enough, you were talking about being scared of sharks. When I was a kid, I was really scared of sharks, not because of Jaws, but because of Thunderball, because in Thunderball with James Bond, there's a shark in the pool. And every time I get in a pool, I'd always see the glass light, and I would think, oh God, it's gonna open up and the shark's gonna come through. This is the stuff that happens, I guess, when you're a 10-year-old, right? As far as the movie goes, I agree. It's, to me, I'm going to make some bold statements here.
Whoa.
It's what it is. It's the best horror film ever.
Oh, wow.
To me, it's in the top
Hot
3.
take.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, when it comes to the 3 best, it's, as far as just the best films, horror films, it's The Exorcist, it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's Jaws. And
Over
I think,
Halloween.
yes, I would put Halloween like 4 right behind those. And that's not to insult Halloween. It's just, if you're looking end to end as the film as a whole, I would even say that Jaws, honestly, is probably the top 5 greatest films of all time. I would say it's in the top 5. I mean, you can make the argument for the other 5, but the reason I say that is just, it's a horror film, like you all alluded to. There's suspense, there's Hitchcock. But what's amazing about Jaws is the characters, the way the acting is, the way you are invested in the people. Chief Brody, the minute you meet him, you immediately empathize with him, right? Like, he's late to his job, he's having a long, hard day. People are bugging him about stupid crap. He's got the fencing under his arm, it's like you're like, okay, this is me, right? I'm going to work. This he's like my guy, right? And just the way he is through the film, he's terrified of water. He's terrified of the shark. He doesn't want to go out there, but somehow he's the guy that has to stop this damn thing because he's the only one left at the end to really do something about it. I just love that arc. I love that it's him. He's the guy that gets put there, the fish out of the water, literally. Mayor Vaughn being so, to me, Mayor Vaughn is the villain of the movie. Even though Jaws is the villain, Mayor Vaughn is really the guy who's really the most sadistic, just because him letting everything go on, knowing that there's a shark in the water, letting people swim just because he was worried about Amityville tourism, right? I mean, that's, they even made memes about that during COVID. I think Jordan Peele did one where it was like, the churches will be open Sunday, right? It's iconic, right? I mean, when he says, the beaches will be open, and Quint, the great. I mean, there's the there's the whole Captain Ahab thing with him where he's obsessed with the shark. He wants to kill the shark. He basically uses, he lets it go to his head so badly that he basically sabotages the entire boat just because he wants to kill the shark, even though he knows he's doing the wrong thing. And of course, what happens to him later, spoilers. But I think end to end, it's a great film. It's my favorite horror film. Like I said, I think it's one of the greatest of all time, film wise in general. And I just think overall, it works. There's really, you guys were talking about there's slow moments. I could see that. I think though that everything really adds up in the film. It's a build. You go along with Brody for the ride of the movie, and by the end of it, you're just like, holy shit, what else is going to happen, right? And I love, little things. There's one thing in particular I'll get into when we're talking about the deaths, but just the little touches, like even the theme, how the theme is slow, but it kind of builds and changes and builds and changes. And even like my favorite scene in the film is when it first reveals the shark, when he's throwing the chum in the water and he sees it and he just like backs up. And, you know, he knows at that point, he like, pardon my French, he knows we're fucked. He's like, this is bad. But like, they don't know. And it's like, that's just such a brilliant scene, the way they shot that.
And even the way he reacted to it, you know, like we saw that, we were like, oh shit. But he was just like, and it's just like the shock on his face.
Yes.
Like he had a cigarette in his mouth. He was like, you know, that was great acting on his part.
He's the only one that's really afraid too, because Hooper wants to be there to see it. He wants to study this shark, and Quint obviously has an obsession with killing sharks, so he's the only rational fear person of the group.
Yeah,
and that's the classic "we're gonna need a bigger boat" scene too. And also Spielberg,
you're gonna need a bigger boat.
Yeah, you're gonna need a bigger boat. Yeah, but Spielberg also does a Hitchcockian kind of focus pull with the camera to accentuate to Roy Scheider's Brody's character going backwards too, to kind of really highlight, oh wow, he's making a major step back from this thing. This is a much bigger shark than what they were in for.
Yeah, and the shark itself is the funny thing about the shark is the length. I've done a lot of research into this because I'm really into sharks and I love the movie. And like a lot of people, you kind of, you go down the rabbit hole with these things. The length of the shark itself is not impossible. The over-exaggerated part is the width with the shark, because it's almost like what they did was they took like a baby megalodon and just made it like the length of a great white. So it's not, I don't want to say that this is totally impossible, but the width is just kind of ridiculous, right? Like it's
they've actually found great whites longer than the Jaws shark.
Yeah,
it's 25 feet, right?
Shark weed. Yeah,
it's 20 feet, 25 at least. Well, and I know we've been talking about whether or not it's a horror film or not. I think what makes this such an effective horror film is the fact that this is real. I mean, I know it's not real, but in the realm of horror, it's usually a supernatural being or somebody that's has supernatural abilities or strength, or just doesn't feel like they would really exist. This is real. I mean, this is a real thing that could happen. Not necessarily all the stuff that happens, but shark attacks do happen, and they happen quick, just like in the film. So that's part of what makes it so terrifying. Is you could watch this movie and say, "Oh, I could see that actually happen."
Right. Yeah. It's the one thing that I don't see sort of brought up a lot anymore. There's kind of an odd thing about the film. I don't know if you guys had read about this, but are you familiar with the whole Lady of the Dunes theory with this movie? So basically, in 1974, there was a lady. Her name was Ruth Marie Terry. She was a murder victim found around Martha's Vineyard, like badly murdered. And in the film Jaws, there's been all these web sleuths, and even Joe Hill, Steven Spielberg's son, or Stephen King's son, did some research on it. And there's a scene where a lot of the people in the town of Amityville are in the middle of the town, and I think it's during the parade where they're all just kind of hanging out. And basically, you see this girl with like a bandana on. It's like a red bandana. And they've done these like analysis of her body in the scene, and they think that's the same girl, Ruth Marie Terry, that died. It's kind of creepy. There's been all these kind of things online about it. People have written articles about it. So yeah, look up Lady of the Dunes. Kind of an interesting tie-in to Jaws. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
Cool. Before we get to our kills, TJ, go ahead and do your trivia question and exclude anyone who Googled it.
Who would do such a thing immediately after he mentioned that was going to be the
trivia? Yes. So during the production of Jaws, the whole crew referred to Jaws by a name. What was Jaws's name?
I do know this, but I don't want to. If y'all,
I'd have to. I'm embarrassed because I've not only have I seen the movie like 50 times, but I've watched the documentaries and I've seen it brought up many times, so I should remember. I feel like it was something very simple, like Frank or Bill or something like that. But I can't remember for sure.
Very close.
It's close.
Bruce the shark.
Bruce,
Which,
yeah,
if you
Bruce.
think about the way we introed with Jay mistakenly talking about Finding Nemo, there was a
That was the
giant
name
red
of the
white shark
in
in that
Nemo,
movie.
Bruce,
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, that's funny.
They also called it Flaws. I read that somewhere.
Flaws.
Pretty funny. It had so many flaws.
Very apropos.
So Bruce, what if it was just called Bruce? You just saw that iconic cover and said Bruce.
That'd be something.
All right, so let's. There weren't that many, but let's talk about our favorite kills of the flick. I'll go first. I think it was the second kill, which was the kid, because usually you don't kill kids in films; it's frowned upon. But when that happened, that kind of showed us like anything's up for grabs here. Like anything can happen. That was probably my favorite kill. Kellen?
The answer is Quint, and if anything else, that you're wrong. Sorry. I don't know why you hate children, Jay, but no, that's such an iconic scene. That's probably the most intense moment in the movie, aside from when Hooper's in the cage, and the shark is just right there in his face, literally. But just the foreshadowing that he does with his story, not 5 minutes earlier. It's just, like I said, it's one of the most iconic scenes in film. They even made pop figures of that exact moment. So, I mean, I know it's an obvious choice, it's an easy choice, but it's the right one.
Yeah. TJ?
Well, I'm torn on this because I think the most frightening kill is the first kill. Because
night.
It's at night. Girl's naked. You don't really get a sense of that. But just thinking being out there alone, and the drunk guy that passed out on the beach, he ain't helping her, even though she's doing her blood curdling screams and cries. He's just out.
Yeah. He passed out. Yeah.
Yeah, and just and you don't ever see the shark. They were literally tugging her with ropes one way or another, and you just get this herky jerky motion of like, oh, it must be ripping. You just have to assume in your mind's eye what's going on beneath the waves in the dark, and then you see the blood, and then that last gasp where she goes up one at a time and then just down and never comes back, and then just the water gets quiet. It's just, I think cinematically that just really sets the scene, that being the opening scene. Like, oh, what is this thing? I do like the Quint one too. It's honorable mention for me because you actually do see the shark eat him, and it's the goriest. But in terms of effectiveness, for me, it's the first one.
Steve?
Yeah, I think I'm there with you, Jay, because yeah, I mean, the Quint is obviously the most iconic, and just like, as a kid, it's like, oh, gore, and it's like they don't turn the camera, it's not implied, you literally watch him get chomped on. But I don't know, there was something about like the kid on the raft when you first hear it, and just how he pans back, and when you see the fins flip, like he rolls in the water, there's something very impactful about that, like seeing it, that I think that for me as a kid, because the girl at the beginning was creepy, and it's like, okay, this is going to be a creepy movie. But then when I see the kid, you see the fins flip in the water, and then the big splash and the blood kind of shoots up in the air. Little Steve was like, oh, they're doing this. This is going to be graphic, and it really, like, that's when I started to like grip the cushion on the seat, and realize that I'm in for a ride here.
Yeah. John?
All good kills. I agree with everything you guys have said. Quint, definitely for me, it's got to be it. Just because I think just the idea of, Quint he's so scared of being like a victim, like in the Indianapolis, like his former, military friends and everything. He doesn't want that to happen to him, but in a sense, it's like almost poetic. It's like exactly what should happen to him, right? Like he's bitten, and it's so gruesome because you hear it, the crunch, and it's like, what is that? Like they're biting into like his spleen. It's like, oh, it's awful. And I just like that scene is so good too, because right when it happens, like Brody sees it and he's just like he just turns away. He's like, oh, like that's just so. Even to this day, I can watch any horror movie and I still watch that scene and I'm like, that is brutal. So definitely Quint.
Awesome. All right, so we'll move on to the ratings and then close up shop. For me, this is another one that's God tier, like Halloween. I mean, I don't think I could ever give it anything other than a 5 out of 5. Kellen?
So I like to be conservative with my ratings to give room for better movies. So I think a solid 3 would be embarrassing because this is obviously a 5-star movie. So I think that is
John,
my first 5.
That he's the smartass of the group. This is what I was referring.
I think that's the first 5 I've given, but it goes with what John said. This is not just a top S tier horror film. This is an S tier film. I mean, this is upper echelon of cinema. This is you can't deny how great and impactful this movie was. So yeah, definitely 5.
You didn't give what'd you give Halloween?
I think 4.5.
4.5. Okay, that's fair. All right, TJ.
Man, I'm kind of going to do the inverse of Kellen, where I'm going to do the 4.5. I mean, I'm really, I mean, I'm almost right there. It's just I think Spielberg in his career and his oeuvre, whatever you want to say, he does have for me some better films. But I mean, for
it'll be wrong sometimes, TJ.
Yeah, I mean, 4.5 and 5. It's all going to probably round up.
I mean, it's going to be a 5 anyways.
I'm going to go 4.5 because my God tier doesn't have a lot there, and I've only given 5 stars to Halloween, and I rewatch Halloween like 5-1 in terms of watching Jaws. So,
all right, Steven.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really say it's my favorite film of all time and not give it a 5. So,
correct, John.
Definitely 5 out of 5 is perfect. The only thing close Spielberg's ever done is Schindler's List and Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's it. I mean, E.T. is great, but Raiders of the Lost Ark is right behind it. This is perfect.
No love for Jurassic Park?
Jurassic Park is my favorite film. It's also a good one. Like, do you consider it a horror movie, or is it just like a sci-fi movie? But I still consider it still has horror elements, but I wouldn't call it that first. But yeah, I love Jurassic.
Yeah,
Jurassic
I
Park
put it in the sci-fi horror.
Yeah, that T-Rex scene, that's horrific.
Is Cocaine Bear horror?
Right?
I guess so.
I mean, who knows? All right, so that comes out to a 4.9. So guess what? We'll call that a 5, TJ. So suck on that. 5 anyway.
Hey, I'm representing. It's a good movie.
Hey, I'm repping too.
Okay.
All right, so that's going to be it for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to wherever you're listening to this podcast now. Follow us on Instagram. And remember, starting July 19th, you can find us on Tingler Television every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time on Roku. We do have ad spots available. If you want to jump on that, just shoot any of us a message or shoot us a message on Instagram, and we can give you some more details on that. Steven, thank you for joining us. You want to take a second to tell everybody where they can find you, your work, your band, and all that fun stuff?
Sure. Yeah, I play lead guitar in the Nearly Deads, as Jay mentioned, and you can pretty much find us anywhere. Twitter and Facebook at the Nearly Deads, Instagram at the Nearly Deads official. We got a .com, whatever, Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, wherever you want it, it's there. We're alternative rock, and we're all big pop culture enthusiasts too. So, we used to a lot of our old shirts. We had a Jaws shirt. We had a Jaws shirt. We had a Night of the Living Dead shirt. A lot of zombie. Like our first music video that broke out is a zombie video. We've done some post-apocalyptic stuff. So we like to play with pop culture and incorporate it into our brand and our music. So yeah, if you like that kind of stuff, check us out. And we have a brand new album coming out July 7th. And Jay was so kind to book our release show. So that's going to be on the 13th at the East Side Bowl. And I think the doors open at 6:30. So if you find us online, you'll find a link to get tickets. You can make it out to that, and we'll have the new album there, and we'll be signing and just hanging out and having a good time. Other than that, yeah, I just trying to do a little bit of everything. I also, Jay promoted earlier back when I released it last year. I wrote a psychological horror. I guess you'd call it novella, shorter than a novel, longer than a short story. And you can find that on Amazon. It's called The Broken Man. And yeah, if you like stuff like Silent Hill, it's kind of in that vein.
Yeah, I bought it as soon as it came out. I will admit I'm only halfway through it because I'm off with reading because I like to watch movies instead. But what I've read so far is fantastic. You can find it on Amazon.
It's also an audiobook if you'd rather listen to it.
Yeah, I'm a huge music person. You guys who know me know I've booked shows for years. Come out July 13th. That's a Thursday night. It's an East Side Bowl. It's $10 to get in. We got the Nearly Deads for their album release show. Hussy Fit, The First, and Sleeper Signal all playing. It's $10. It's gonna be a good time. East Side Bowl is a super cool place. If you haven't been, they have a restaurant. They have bowling lanes. They have arcades, bar, anything you can ask for. It's a great place, and it's close to everything. It's right on the cusp of Madison. Used to be a Kmart. So come out to that show. If you come up to me at that show and say, "Hey, I listened to your Jaws episode," I might give you a sticker or something special. Who knows? If I run out of stickers, maybe a hug, high five. We'll see how it goes. Point is, come to the show. It's going to be great. The new tunes I've heard so far is great from the Nearly Deads. Great band, a lot of fun. It's been one of the highlights of me doing the music stuff for as long as I have. So, all right, that's going to do it for this episode. Signing off, I'm Jay with John, Kellen, TJ, and Steven. And until next time,
keep it spooky.